In this video, we're going to explore a few improvements to the texture baking process in 3D Coat as of version 4, including some tools that will help you troubleshoot difficult areas on your model. For example, with this glove, I have several layers, and some of them I want 3D Coat to bake as if it's one object. Okay, and this really adds a lot of complexity for the baking engine. And so Andrew developed some new tools that will help with these types of situations. So let's use this as an example. Okay, and what I'm going to do is, instead of clicking on each one of these to make them visible, I'm going to go to the very top and show hidden volumes in subtree. Okay. So what I essentially have here is a parent layer for the glove and a parent layer for the straps. And in the retopo room, you have a tool that will basically bake these two objects separately. It's going to treat everything that's a child of this glove layer, it's going to treat it as if it's one object. And the fact that I have a number of different objects in there, though, especially when they're overlapping, again, it can create some issues whenever you're going through the baking process, and even issues with snapping. If these vertices somehow get in the cracks or whatnot, it will typically provide some problems during the baking process. So if it gets up underneath an object, or maybe if it happens to fall into one of these little cracks or something, it can interfere. So Andrew devised some new tools that will help counter these issues. I want to show a little trick though that I use so that I get fewer snapping issues like this. I go to the voxel room, and when I have objects that overlap like this, what I try to do is I create a new layer. I can either go down here or just click this on the root level here and click on plus, and it will give me a new layer like this. And based upon the detail I know and the size of the object, it's not very large in the scene, so I know I'm going to have to increase the resolution quite a bit. Now if it was a large object, I would not need to increase the resolution, because the larger it is, the more resolution it naturally has. Okay, the smaller the object is on the grid, then the more resolution you're going to need to give it. That's why you see this one is at about 16 levels. 12 to 16 levels will be about right for this. Okay, so I'm going to delete this blank layer because I already have one here. And again, even on a blank layer, you can increase the resolution to the level that you think you'll need. I have 16 levels here, so that should be plenty. It's not overkill, and I think it's about right. So anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create basically a master copy of this parent layer with all the child layers. I'm going to hide the straps layer because I don't really need to do that for this object. It's simple enough. But again, here I have a lot of children, but I want it to be merged as if it's one single object. So I'm going to click this layer right here that I created, this blank layer. I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose Merge Visible. Okay, now you can see it's showing through just a little bit with a standard gray shader. So I'm going to go ahead and hide this original layer here, and you can see I have one contiguous copy here. Right, it's the same thing as if I went in and clicked merge subtree. And what that would do is it would merge all these child layers into the parent layer as if it's one. Okay, so here I have, I'm just going to call this glove proxy. Okay, and I really don't need all that much detail on this, because really what I'm going to use this for is just to snap the retopo mesh to. That way, when I actually go through the baking process with this original glove and all these different layers and so on, okay, all the vertices should be snapped in the correct location. I don't have to worry about them dipping down underneath, you know, the top object and so on. They should all be in place. Okay, so that's what I did here when I constructed this glove, the retopo mesh on it. So what I'm going to do now is, because I still have this object here in the paint room, if I want to redo this, typically what you're going to do is in the objects panel, you're going to clear it. You're just going to delete it, because otherwise 3D Coat is just going to create another copy when you try to redo the baking process. So if you don't have the objects or the materials panels in your interface here in the paint room, you can access them from the Windows menu under pop-ups. Object materials, same as materials here. Pop-ups, sub-objects. And so really 3D Coat oftentimes will bake everything you have here, all these retopo objects. It will just create one master object. It's kind of like an OBJ file of sorts. Okay, and this is your mesh. These are essentially like your UV maps. You're talking about materials, and I can hide the straps there. Okay, so anyway, the bottom line is, when I clear this object, okay, I no longer have any materials, and I need to go in and clear all these layers here. But I want to be careful, because some of these are actually vertex paint. Now, if you haven't done any vertex painting, you don't have to worry about this. So I'm going to click View, Show Voxels in Paint Room. If you've done vertex painting on a model, you probably want to make sure that you bring your Vox Tree Layer panel here as well. That way you can hide and unhide certain parts as you're painting. It's also the same way, basically the same thing as going to the View menu, Show Voxels in Paint Room. Now, as of this recording, there's really no indication of which of these are the voxel paint layers and which ones are the image map layers that got baked. So I'm going to have to go in and see which ones these are. I think this is fine. Yeah. So I'm going to start here, actually go up to the top, select the top layer, and I'll just start deleting. And they delete pretty fast. There is a new option here to delete all paint layers, but for some reason Andrew overlooked this, and it creates blank layers of all these paint layers, and it just renames them, like layer 26, layer 25, and so on. And that's not that helpful. Hopefully he'll get this fixed by the time you see this video, and you can just clear them all this way. But in this case, I'm going to delete them one by one, because again, I have some vertex paint layers that I don't want to be deleted. Okay, so again, hopefully here shortly, when you click on this, it will delete all the paint layers when you want to redo a baking attempt. Okay. So yeah, I'll just continue just going through the ones. All right. That looks like that was all of them. So we can go back to the retopo room. And I have the Vox Tree Layer panel visible here too, so I can hide that original parent layer. I'm going to show this proxy one. and hide the straps. And I'm going to select this glove layer, and what I want to do is just snap to this proxy. I'm going to go up here to the different snapping routines that you can choose from. Typically this is the best one, closest along normal, but again, if you have a complex object with lots of layers and they're overlapping objects, like for example maybe armor on a soldier or mech warrior, things like that, where you have overlapping parts, you probably want to choose this, snap to outer surface. And now I'm just going to go ahead and click snap. With that done, I don't need this proxy anymore. I can go ahead and unhide this original layer. Now, because I have two main objects that I want it to bake separately, I want 3D Coat to bake the glove as a separate object, and I want it to bake the straps as a separate object. I could do it one of two ways. Again, I could hide one that I don't want to bake and go ahead and merge one at a time. Then I would have to go over here to the Vox Tree Layer panel, hide the glove, unhide the straps, and do likewise. Merge again. This relatively new feature, it came out about a year or so ago, but very few people know about it, and that is the sequential texture baking tool set. It uses names correspondence, and what that means is 3D Coat is going to internally look for a correspondence in naming. So it's going to look for a glove, a voxel object that corresponds to the mesh. So I'm telling 3D Coat, look, I want you to bake these two together and these two straps and straps together. So again, it just automates the process of me having to do it one at a time. With that done, I'm going to go ahead and turn straps on, and let's go ahead and check groups for volumes correspondence. It says they match. Okay, so I'm going to hide that layer. I could probably just go ahead and delete it, and as a matter of fact I probably will. There we go. If I wanted to save a copy just in case, I could create, in the models palette, I could create a new folder for it. Let's say I've got one for, yeah, so I could just drag and drop that layer, and 3D Coat would save a copy that I could access quickly. As you can see, I should have one here. All right. So going back to the new tools, here is this new dialog that you have. You could always go back in and adjust the inner and the outer baking cage. And just as you would in other 3D applications where you're doing texture baking, you generally want your inner cage and outer cage to be as close as possible without any parts protruding. Okay, so let's go ahead outside shell. I can see the preview here. Let's try one. And examine it and see if I have anything sticking out. It does not look like I do. Okay, and also too is these fingers, because they're close together, you can see I'm getting a little bit of overlap. That's probably going to cause me some issues when I'm baking. So to try and alleviate that, I'm going to need to reduce the outside cage as much as possible. So let's bring it down to 0.5. That's better. And what I can do is bring it down as low as possible And if I see anything protruding, then what I can do is go in and add what's called a zone, basically a sphere, in the areas that are troublesome or that are poking through. So I'm going to probably try and stick with this 0.5. I might go a little bit lower, 0.3. Okay, so now I can see I've got definite areas that are poking through. 0.4. Okay. So there are a couple ways I could actually approach this, not only adding this extra zone, but I could go in, turn auto snapping off, and basically pull, maybe use move vertices. I could go in and pull the vertices away, just a little bit off in these areas. Okay, so let's go ahead and choose merge for normal maps. It's showing me the inner scan depth. And what I can do to see how it looks on the inside of this mesh is actually go and ghost all the layers. I click on this little second icon, and I can ghost those. Now go back to retopo. I can now see that inner mesh. Okay, let's try 1.5. Let's try 0.75. Okay. All right. So let's try it again. And I can see my inner shell is still, it looks like it's sticking out just a bit. So probably 0.9. We'll just go with 1. That should be fine. 1.1. I'll just go back with 1.1. Okay. And so what I'm going to do is add a few zones here. Pick zone. What I'm going to do is, just as I would with a brush, right click to drag left and right to scale it. Okay. Quick. The inner depth, outer depth. I want to change this outer depth to 2. Oops. Okay. So basically it just gives me the ability to designate specific areas where I need to increase the zone without actually applying that to the entire mesh. So I probably want to do that in all the knuckle areas. Okay. Go back to 1. Add another zone. Pick zone. Add a zone. Pick zone. Add a zone. So I'm going to do that with all the knuckles just to be on the safe side. Okay. Pick zone. Oops. Pick that again. I'm going to decrease that amount. Pick this other one. Reduce that amount. Add another zone. Okay. And I probably want to add one more right here in this knuckle area. Now, I may not necessarily need this, so you could try it first without these zones like this. But again, I just knowing that they generally cause some issues, I'm going to go ahead, place it there anyway. Okay. So I think we're good here. I need to go in and change these. Oops. Okay. So let's give this a try. It's asking about baking local occlusion. I think the default amount is 20. The last value I used was 10. Let's try a 2K map. No subdivision. I want to leave it like it is. Keep the UVs I have laid out. Full UV set smoothing. Okay, and okay. Let's go to the paint room. And yeah, it looks like we still had some issues here on the inside where the baking cage kind of overlapped. But overall, it did a really nice job. Okay, and let's see, baked occlusion. So yeah, I would just have to try and go back in and see if I can massage this a bit differently, or just clean it up with texture maps, either one. But overall, let me hit the wireframe key, W for wireframe. So yeah, I don't see any visible seams. I noticed on the last baking attempt before this new feature, I noticed I had some issues right in here. They're no longer there. I don't see any issues where in the knuckles where I typically would have some of those problems. So it seems to do a fairly good job. Now to summarize, If you happen to have an object that has overlapping parts or is rather complex, you may want to start with snap to outer surface as your default mode. If you do not have a complex object, if it's fairly simple, then snap to closest long normal is probably the one you want to use. So with that, we'll conclude this tutorial, and I want to thank you for watching. Please make sure to click the like button so we know these videos do help. Thank you.